Great. So, as always, we have lots and lots of questions, and I hope to answer as many as I can. And I'm looking for questions that are, universal to everyone here, or as universal as possible. I'm going to start out with some basic questions. Several people have asked, where in the program do we specify rates of return or the inflation rate? What are we assuming?
Sure. Okay, so let's go back to the program. And if you come down here to settings and assumption, and you specify an inflation rate and a nominal rate of return, that's we have default values here of 1.25%, because the rates we were looking at when the market changed so much due to COVID-19 were in this area where the Treasury bond rate was 1.25% for a bit, and the inflation rate. So we looked over, I think it was the month of April, and saw that the rates were averaging around this number. So we put in these as default rates. The inflation index bond rate was close to zero. The nominal return on 30-year treasuries was 1.25%. So that implied an assumed inflation rate of 1.25%. So these are the assumptions, but if you want to change those, you can. You can also change, tell the program that, hey, we think the interest rate is going to be, it's going to be 1.25% for a couple of years, and then, starting in 2023, it's going to go up to 3%. So you can have it change through time if you want. So this is where you enter that information. What's the next question, Alex?
Can you show the mechanics of how to actually start or create an alternative profile? What does that look like?
Yeah, you just come down here to alternative profile, and you click in a name. Let's call, maybe you could call it future out-of-pocket healthcare costs. And then you'd add the profile. And now right here, you see that it's already, now you're in this particular profile. And now you would probably come here, click on household, and you'd want to, click on household and want to enter special expenses. And you'd add an expense, and maybe, so this would be maybe home health care. And it wouldn't be tax related, and maybe it's going to be $30,000 a year, starting in 2040, and it's going to end. An end year is going to be, let's say, maybe it's like a 5-year expenditure. Now you're set to run it. All you come here is click save, and bingo, you're all set to run the profile. You just click on reports, and you can compare this case with any other case, with the base case, with any of the other profiles that you've set up. So what's your next question, Alex?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that a lot of people have been asking, where do I enter things like, future healthcare costs, and it's under special expenses, right?
Yes, special expenses, definitely under special expenses. And
right.
And we keep upgrading.
Okay.
We may be able to give people guidance about what are reasonable out-of-pocket expenses to think about, or nursing home costs. So as we, through time, have the time to make, we're always trying to improve the program. We're trying to do the most important things first, things that people are asking for the most, and we will be adding a little more guidance about that down the road.
So some people were a little skeptical about whether the program was accurately taking into account the property taxes in Texas. Can you just talk a little bit about how the program incorporates taxes?
Oh yeah, you would when you come to yeah, I get the point that Texas has got some expenses that has some taxes that maybe Connecticut doesn't have. Maybe it has higher property taxes. So when you're thinking about buying a house in Texas, you'd say, okay, in this new house, you have a space to put in uh, property taxes right here. So I'm assuming that they're half of what they were in Connecticut, but maybe they're the same as they were in Connecticut because they're so much higher. So you put in whatever the number is. And so maybe it's not going to be $160,000 increase in this particular scenario. Maybe it's going to be smaller, but whatever it is, you put it in right here. And there's also state sales taxes that can differ. Connecticut, I think, has a pretty high state sales tax. Florida and Texas, they get more of the revenue from property taxes and sales taxes. So you'd also want to think about the sales taxes. If they're higher in one state versus the other, then a dollar in one state is going to buy more than a dollar in the other state, given the sales taxes. What's next, Alex?
Okay, so a lot of people are also asking, well, you know, we just ran the program and we are factoring in optimizing Social Security, but what if Social Security is going to change? And do you expect it to change? And if so, how do you change it? Or how do you model the change in the program?
So under settings and assumption, you come over here for whatever profile you're in, you click on Social Security and you say, okay, I think starting in 2030, there's going to be maybe a 20% decline in Social Security. So now you've set up, you could set up an alternative profile. Social Security is going to be cut, and then you can run the program, see whether the robo optimization says to, you could do this for the base plan, for example, change this input and see whether it still says to wait to 70 or whether to go at 68. In general, I've run this particular case under case studies at our website. If you go to the bottom of the homepage at maxify.com, you'll see a bunch of case studies, one of which I believe covers cuts in future Social Security benefits. If not, we'll put one up. But I have run that experiment, and it turns out that the advantage of waiting is smaller, but it's still significant. If you're talking about a benefit cut maybe 10 years out, because you're going to get cut whether you take the money early or whether you take the money later. You're going to get proportionally more cut by taking it later, but the return to being patient with Social Security is so huge because the benefit starts after inflation at roughly 75% higher number than at age 62. Maybe it's like 72% higher at this point, given the increase in the retirement age, or 70% higher, but it's a lot higher. So you have to give up, 8 years of a lower number of 8 years of a check, and then you're hit 70 and you get this much bigger number for the rest of your life. And the real concern with, I'm just going to erase this. The real concern is with longevity risk here is, and Social Security is not dying young and not having taken your Social Security. Suppose you're 62 and you decide to take your Social Security at 70, and then you get pancreatic cancer at 63 and you die. Now, where are you going to be? You're going to be transported to heaven, and you're not going to be kicking yourself in heaven that you didn't take your Social Security at 62 and that you lost out. Where you're really going to be upset about making the wrong Social Security decision is when you're 98 and you haven't had pancreatic cancer, and you're living on cat food because you have too low a Social Security benefit coming in, and you just die to have a 70% higher benefit every month, check every month. So we have to realize that personally, the biggest, dying young is a huge personal psychological risk. It's a terrible tragedy for ourselves, for our families, at a personal level. At a financial level, it's really terrific news because the bills stop. You don't have to pay for yourself. Of course, if you're working and supporting people, then it's still a financial tragedy. But if you're retired and you die early, uh, financially, that's not bad news. That's good news. Bad news financially is living to 100. I'm trying to put this in a very stark term because I'm an economist, and this is a way we're trained to talk to people. And I know it's not the most PC way to discuss these matters, but financially speaking, the big risk is living to your maximum age of life. It's not dying young. So let's go to the next question.
Okay, a lot of people, a lot of our users here are reminding us that there is an annuities section right underneath pensions on the dashboard. I don't know if maybe you just missed that, but it is there. And
No,
if you want to,
there's
yeah.
also a way here it is. No, that's percent. Well, I'm not sure why I didn't see this. Percent to annuitize. So here's the answer. Yes,
Yeah.
under pensions, if we restore pensions, for example, for George, we could restore pensions right here and add a pension, and we could specify whether or not it's
Yeah, but
yeah.
you see underneath pensions, it's annuities on the dashboard. There's annuity. You can add an annuity there.
Yeah, you can add annuities that are apart from retirement account annuities. But what I screwed
Right.
up with is, and I apologize, is that when you go to settings and assumptions, for some reason, when I was toggling down here, I went too fast, and I
Right.
forgot the whole section called annuity section, where you can tell the program, hey, I'd like to annuitize 40% of my Fidelity account or my T. Rowe Price account when I start taking it at 62. And I'd like to have a guaranteed period so I get money for sure for 10 years. Even if I die, my heirs get money for sure for 10 years. And you can specify whether it stops after the guaranteed period. You can specify if there's a survivor benefit, whether that pension is graded and might grow by 2-3% a year. Now that's described by a lot of annuity companies, insurance companies, as some inflation protection. It's not really inflation protection because if inflation is 20% this year, your annuity is still going to go up just by 3%. So this is not real inflation protection. Something that is real inflation protection is if you have a nominal mortgage. We talked about the advantage of paying off your mortgage, but a mortgage can also be a risk mitigating device when it comes to inflation, because if you're paying, let's say, $2,000 a month in mortgage payments, and now inflation takes off and the price of a hot dog goes from $3 to $50, well, you're going to be paying back your mortgage in watered down dollars. So it becomes a natural inflation hedge. So one thing to think about here is that if you do annuitize, maybe you're less reluctant to pay off that mortgage because you have some inflation hedge that offsets the risk of getting paid your annuity in watered down dollars. Okay, that's going to happen, but you're going to be able to pay off your mortgage in watered down dollars. And so the two risks are going to kind of offset each other to a certain extent. But you can see what's involved here by running the program with different assumptions about future inflation. Again, you go back over here to safe returns and inflation, and you say, will inflation change? You say, yes, I think that in 5 years, inflation is going to go up to 10% a year. Future inflation rate, 10. Bingo. Now you run it. And you can see right away by doing a comparison report how this compares with inflation not changing. And this is a way to assess the risk. We will be formally incorporating inflation risk in the future in our Monte Carlo simulations. I'm going to be talking about the Monte Carlo simulations as part of the next webinar on July 15th. But one thing we want to do is formally show people the variability of their living standard associated with inflation, given the fact that some of their resources could be a nominal pension, it could be a nominal annuity, are not inflation protected. Let me take the next question.
Okay, this is a good basic question from William. He says, please explain discretionary expenses again, and is it for the couple or each person? I find it very confusing.
Oh, okay.
So what is discretionary spending?
Okay, I'm going to run the base report for this for George and Jean again to point this out. And I'm going to look at the annual spending report here, spending overview, and let's see. Oh, actually, I'm going to look at this report. Yeah, okay, here we go. So you can see here discretionary spending and fixed spending. So the discretionary spending is for the couple, and it's all the spending that's over and above spending you have to do on these things. On your housing, that's a fixed spending expenditure. Your taxes, federal and state, that's what we call fixed spending. Retirement account contributions, fixed spending. Medicare Part B premiums, fixed spending. Life insurance premiums, fixed spending. So here's your resources in present value of your lifetime. And here's the difference between this number and this number. The sum of all these numbers is the $3.2 million. That's what you get to spend. And then the program is being very careful to try and allocate that spending over time so that it's as smooth as possible, subject to not putting you into debt, subject to your cash flow constraints. So I hope this is clear. Discretionary spending is your the money you have to spend on food, on vacations, on cars, on gifts. That's what we call discretionary spending. Now, another fixed expenditure might be an alimony payment that you would enter. If you had alimony payments, then we would have part of this would be other expenses. This number would not be zero; it would be positive if we entered under special expenses alimony payments for, let's say, the next 3 years that George had to pay his ex-spouse. What about tuition payments for children? That would also be entered as a special expense. Loan repayments, that would also be entered as special expenses, and they would be part of the fixed expenses. So to understand the fixed spending, everything in gray here is fixed spending. Everything in red here is discretionary spending. And so this is a kind of a full characterization. And then if you want to come down here and look at more details of what's involved here, we've got the discretionary spending, and all these other things are a breakdown of the fixed spending categories. You can see Medicare premiums quite large, and they grow because we have a baseline assumption consistent with the history that Medicare Part B premiums are going to grow because Medicare costs have historically been growing at such a crazy rate. Let's go to the next question, Alex.
Yeah, this is a question from Chris. He's wondering if you could elaborate on what you mean by safe rate of return. Is that his conservative estimate, or is that like a theoretical safest possible approach? What does that mean?
Well, a safe rate of return would be and we're going back over here to settings and assumptions. And look here, the nominal safe rate of return, we don't think the U.S. government is going to go bankrupt, although there are scenarios where that could happen. So I want to say that nothing really is perfectly riskless in this world. We're seeing, this incredible risk hit us namely of a pandemic that's wreaking havoc personally and economically on everybody, many worse than others, but so nothing's risk-free. But if we don't think the government is going to default, the U.S. federal government, then you can earn, at least at the time we looked at the numbers, you could earn 1.25% nominal. The return on inflation index bonds at that point was essentially zero. So the implied inflation rate was also 1.25%. So in other words, the inflation adjusted return was zero. So therefore, if the return before inflation is 1.25%, it implies that the inflation is 1.25%, so that the return after inflation is zero in real terms. So this is basically what we're assuming, that you can earn zero in real terms because you can actually go out there in the market and buy a 30-year TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Security. You can buy it today, and it will yield, well, at the time it was yielding zero. I think today it might be yielding something slightly positive, but it's going to be close to zero. So what we're doing here in this part of the program is in the base plan and the maximization plan, we're assuming that you can get that safe TIPS return, 30-year TIPS return for sure. And this part of the analysis is what we're going to talk about on July 15th, is saying, look, Maxify, I've got some money that's safely invested, but I've got some other money that's invested in the stock market, some's invested in real estate, in REITs. I want to look at the whole spread of my living standard through time, the level and range of the outcomes that I might experience, to see whether I'm taking on too much portfolio risk or too little, or whether I'm spending too aggressively early or not. And there are other reports here. We have a survivor report where you can, after you've run the base plan or any plan, you can see how survivors would do if one of the two couples, one of the two spouses or partners passed away at any date. You can see how the survivors would do, get a full set of reports. And then here you have comparison reports that you can run. And then we're going to have a budgeting report here that's planned for the future. In the meantime, after you run the base report, you can come down here. Let me just show you this really quickly, because I mentioned this last time, but I wanted to, it's a little bit buried down here. You can do budgeting by going to the progress tracker, click on that, and hit continue, and you get to see, you basically get to budget your discretionary spending. If you use a typical budget, or if you budget from scratch, you get to put the amounts in, and then as you put in extra budget categories, you see how much money you have left over. So you can do budgeting right this minute in our software. You can see whether your outlays on a discretionary basis are living within your discretionary, total discretionary budget. And if they're not, you have to basically cut back or come up with some other way to have, or do some of the things that I've done today to try and come up with safe ways to raise your lifetime spending. So let's go to the next question, Alex.
Yeah, this is a question from Deborah. She says, I assume this program reflects tax rate changes of 2018. What if tax tables change again in the future? If I purchase the program, for what term can it be used?
The program is continually being updated. In this case, it's the right word. So when the new year rolls around, we get the 1040 form. We find out what the new tax brackets are. We figure out what the new Social Security COLA is, what the new Social Security brackets are, what the state, all 42 state income tax provisions are. We get a book that details those provisions, or we go to the actual state 1040, the equivalent of the 1040 form on the state. So we have three people, not three sets, who are spending a good part of the year updating the program for taxes, for Medicare Part B premium provision changes, uh, for all this, for Social Security provision changes. So we're trying to keep the program up to date. It costs you nothing to get, when you run it and we've upgraded or updated something, you'll just see the program coming back with different numbers, but they reflect the new information about your taxes or Medicare or Social Security. So there's no extra charge for that. We do have a renewal charge, and we don't have any automatic uh, uh, processing of a renewal. You have to come in. We send you a message, I think, a couple weeks before your subscription runs out, and then we invite you to come back and renew, but we don't automatically renew you because we haven't asked your permission to do that. We don't think that's kosher, legitimate, appropriate. So we don't automatically renew anybody. We require people to make their own decision. But the other thing I want to say is that if you let your renewal lapse for, let's say, a year or two or many years, and you come back and you renew at that point, your data will still be there, and it will be rolled over. So certain things will be updated for the current year that you're in, but you'll want to look at all your inputs and make sure they're current. But things like, your basic demographics, things of this nature, we're not going to eliminate just because you haven't paid for the renewal for that year, because we realize that you will likely want to come back and run the program again. So we're trying to be as helpful as possible in this respect. Next question, Alex. Alex?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to ask a question from Paul here.
Okay.
Does the program take into effect the RMD if you have a retirement plan?
Oh, absolutely. It takes into account the required minimum distribution, and that's now age 72. So the program, the day that was put into law, we updated our program the very day. Just to give you an idea of how quickly we update things, Social Security had a massive change in its benefit provisions, not only with respect to younger people, but with respect to older people who they partly grandfathered under the old law. And we were able to revise all our Social Security code, which probably is a ream worth of, if you printed out our Social Security code, it'd probably be a ream worth of paper, the printout. We had it all updated in 2 weeks. So, and we updated the 2017 tax code right away as well. If you look at under settings and assumptions, you can click on taxes, and you have the option to run the tax under current tax law. You can assume current tax law is in place, and current tax law assumes that the pre-2017 tax code will come back into play. I think it's in 2027 or 2028. So, or you can say that the TCJA, the Tax Cut and Job Acts, the current tax law that we're living under will be made permanent, will stay permanent after 2028, if that's the right year. So you have 3 ways to run this program just by choosing them under one of these options under settings and assumptions. So here again, we made a very rapid updating of the tax code to take this into account, but also we realized that we needed to give people the option, since we didn't know for sure what tax law is going to prevail after 2028, wanted to give them the option to run it different ways. So let's go for the next question.
Okay, this is a question from Bart, and I think it's a good question because it gets to kind of how flexible the program can be. He says, I live in California. How would you model not selling the house, but renting it out and buying a cheaper house in South Carolina or Texas?
Okay, lives in California, not selling it, renting it out, and and then buying it. Okay. So I would specify, I think I would specify, there's different ways to do this, and we're going to make this easier in the future. We know this is on our to-do list to make, dealing with your current house, converting it from a house to a rental unit and converting it from a rental unit into a house. We're going to make that a more seamless operation, just like we've made prepaying your mortgage seamless and doing Roth conversion seamless. We've done that in the last few months. We'll make that seamless. But for right now, the workaround would be, I think the best thing to do would be you sell your house in California. You pretend you're selling your house. Well, you tell the program you're selling your house and you're buying a new house in South Carolina. And at the same time, you tell the program that you're going to, and you can specify under settings and assumptions, you can play around with the load or the commission that you might need to pay, because that enters into this issue. But at the same time, you can specify that you're going to change or have a vacation home that you are going to set up or buy in California equal to the initial house that you have, and that you're going to rent out that vacation home, or you could treat it as a real estate input. So there are a couple ways to do it. I think the best way actually would be to treat it as a real estate purchase that's going to happen this year, and that you're going to get rental income on, and you're going to be able to depreciate because there will be a depreciable property. So I think that's the way to do it. I would say treat your house as being sold, subject to no commission. Specify that you're going to change your housing to South Carolina. That'll be the change in your home. You specify the house you're going to buy there, and then you specify you're going to buy some real estate, which happens to equal the cost of that real estate happens to equal the value of your current house. And now the program has you having your current house intact and has you in this new house. And I think that works out just fine in terms of the cash flow. But I'm available at, I'll give you my cell phone, 617-834-2148, 617-834-2148, or you can email me at kotlikoff@gmail. If you need help with this particular issue, I will help you directly and make sure that we've got this thing working perfectly for you. Okay?
Okay. This is a question from Gary, and a number of people have sort of asked questions in a similar vein. He says, I have always struggled to find where in the report to find yearly Roth withdrawals versus 401k. If you choose to prioritize 401k withdrawals first, does the program assume the 401k account will be exhausted prior to touching the Roth?
It does, and what we need to do is expose a separate Roth account report that talks about, the balances, the contributions to it, the withdrawals from it, the remaining balance. And we're in the process of putting that together because we've had this request, and I apologize that we haven't gotten this done yet, but we've had so many other things that are kind of lower hanging fruit on our plate. But I expect that within a couple of months, you'll see a special Roth report showing up. All of a sudden, you'll run the program, there will be a Roth report, and this will be the answer to your needs in this respect. So just be patient, if you would, for a couple months, and because we're working, as I speak, we're working on that particular report, and we'll have it out in the program. What's the next one, Alex?
Okay. So again, back to moving. This is a question from Robert. It says, how does the program calculate other costs associated with a move to a different state? For example, the new state may have other taxes like property or sales taxes that are quite different and eat up some of the benefit of not paying state income tax.
Okay, so absolutely. And so you would come, if you have you could say, look, I want to copy the base profile as, I start with a base profile. I'm going to add an alternative profile. The alternative profile is going to copy all the inputs of the base profile. So let me just take you through this. Now, let's say this is moved to Alaska, okay? And who knows about Alaska? You know, Alaska's got a different income tax, property taxes. So here I am, moved to Alaska. I go to housing, I specify, what it shows is since I started with the base profile, copied all the inputs from the base profile, but now I'm going to modify the no future changes. I'm going to have a future change. I'm going to have moving to, here's where I'm going to enter the future housing change, add a housing change. I'm going to say, hey, it's going to happen in 2020. I'm going to own a house. I'm going to leave Connecticut and move to Alaska. And I'm going to buy a $500,000 house. Let's see. And the homeowner's insurance, well, I have to put in what the insurance will be. So maybe it's going to be, because of certain reasons, it's $5,000. It's high. Maybe the property taxes, because they have oil from the Arctic area there, it's low, $2,000. Maybe maintenance and condo fee, because this is a very sturdy house, is $1,000 a year. Will it appreciate? Will there be closing costs? How much down payment I'm going to make? Maybe 0% down. I'm going to finance the whole thing, or 80% down. I'm going to put down 80%. And then what's the mortgage interest rate, the mortgage years, the points? That's all the inputs you need. And now you can run the program. And you can compare with a base plan. You can compare with any of the other plans that you've set up. And so you can see that the program is taking into account the property taxes that might be special in Alaska, the homeowner's insurance that might be special, maintenance, but also because you specified here that you're going to be in Alaska, the program knows when it runs that you're going to be paying Alaskan income taxes, which I forget whether Alaska has income taxes. I know they give money to everybody because they get this oil revenue. I just don't recall whether they're one of the 8 states that has an income tax. But anyway, whatever that income tax is, whether it's zero or whatever positive, it's going to be calculated by the program.
And does the program, will the program also take into account capital gains and taxes on selling the house?
Yeah, it will take into account capital gains and losses. It understands that. And because we asked you about your initial purchase price of the house, which should include any improvements, that's your basis. But we also asked you about your current market value of your house. So I believe there's a $500,000 exemption on the sale of the house right now. So if you sold a house with a $2 million capital gain, the program is going to pick that up and hit you with a capital gains tax based probably on a capital gain of like 1.5 million, because you're probably going to have a $500,000 exemption. But yeah, we have a very knowledgeable software engineer, Michael O'Connor, who's in his 70s. He had a long career as the head of research of the Army Corps of Engineers. And I'll just give you this anecdote about how I hired Mike over the phone. I might have said this in a prior webinar, but it bears saying it again if you've heard it. So Mike calls me up and says, this is about 10 years ago. Hey, Larry, do you know anything about you're running you're in charge of your software, right? We didn't have the Maxify tool at that point. We had something called ES Planner, the download program. And he said, you're not getting your alternative minimum taxes correct in your calculation of taxes, federal income taxes. I said, yes, we are. He says, no, you're not. You're not indexing them for inflation. I said, oh, yes, we are. He said, well, yes, you are, but you're indexing them the wrong way. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, there's 3 parameters and you're indexing all 3, and Congress is only indexing one of the three parameters, and every year you're indexing all three. I can't use your program right now because you're not getting the alternative minimum tax correctly indexed through time. You're not adjusting it. There was no automatic adjustment, it was periodic adjustment that we were making, but we were assuming that in effect that there would be, that the policy was effectively the same as automatic adjustment. So here he is telling me that we're indexing, but we're not indexing correctly. And my response to Mike was, can I hire you? And he said yes. And that was 10 years ago. And he's been working full time on making sure that we're getting our taxes exactly right and our Social Security benefit calculations, which are extremely complicated. There's hundreds of thousands of rules. We also have on our staff a gentleman named Jerry Lutz who worked with Social Security for 30 years. He was a technical expert. There are very few technical experts. I think of all the people in the country, Jerry may know more Social Security details than anybody in the country, because I have talked to the people in Baltimore in the actuary office about issues that Jerry gets right that they don't know about. So he's extremely knowledgeable. So the combination of his knowledge and Mike's knowledge, it can't be beat when it comes to Social Security, but also on the taxes, we're trying to be extremely careful and update them, as I said, as soon as possible. So anyway, I went on a little bit of a side segue, but let me go to the next question, Alex. And I think we'll go till about quarter of, about 10 more minutes. How many people do we still have on the webinar?
We still have about 530 people.
Well, that's great. So I want to thank everybody for, once again, well, I'll thank you at the end, but it's just terrific that you're coming to these webinars. Please invite other people to come and see the webinars, view the webinars that we have, to consider buying our software, because we definitely think this can help them and help us improve the software sooner rather than later for all of you. And but let's go on and ask another question.
A lot of people have been asking about can the program incorporate reverse mortgages, and how would you do that?
Yeah, I think that's another module that we're going to, or aspect of the program that we will get to. It may take a year or two. When we have the reverse mortgages, we're going to want to make sure that we expose the risk associated with the reverse mortgages. I'm personally very wary about reverse mortgages for the following reason. If you live in your house for up to close to or to your maximum age of life, a reverse mortgage is a great deal. You get to get money out of your house, and you get to live in your house, don't have to pay back that money, and when you die, you turn over the house to the mortgage company, the reverse mortgage company, and you have in effect been able to consume the equity that you have in the house and have a higher living standard. Now, now where's the risk? The risk is that you take out this thing, you borrow money, and because it's in your pocket, so to speak, you start spending it. You assume you're going to stay in that house till age 100, and then your daughter has unexpectedly a third child, and she needs you to move out from Delaware to Illinois, and now you have to sell your home. At that point, the reverse mortgage becomes due, and that reverse mortgage has been accumulating, and you haven't been making any payments. It's accumulating at a high interest rate, so you're stuck paying a high interest rate. And now you have much less money to make this move to buy a place near your daughter. If you don't prefer to, if you're not able to move in with your daughter, maybe she doesn't have the room, or maybe you want to have a separate pad. So we need to expose the possibility that you have to move and the risk associated with having to pay back this mortgage. Now, there are ways to jury rig a reverse mortgage in Maxify. You would, you could look at the assumption set up as an alternative profile that you take out the money, that you actually live to your maximum age of life, and that you have this extra money, and that you could specify that the house, that there's a special expenditure, which is basically at the very end of your life. If you have $1 million house, you have to hand over in a special expenditure of $1 million to the mortgage company. But along the way, you have this extra money, because right away when you take out this reverse mortgage, you can get money added to your checking account, or maybe that money is coming in, depending on the type of reverse mortgage, over a period of years, and that could be entered as special receipts that are not tax related, and you'll see that your living standard is higher as a result. So there is a way, and again, I'm available to help you model that, but then you can also model as yet another alternative profile, having done this, but then having to move after 5 years and having to repay as a special expense that mortgage, and you'll see then what your living standard is. But this is kind of anticipating that you're going to have to do that, and you'll see that then the reverse mortgage doesn't look quite as attractive. So yeah, there are ways to handle reverse mortgages in the current program. I think we have a FAQ in our help center for reverse mortgages. I'm quite sure we do, because we've run this for people or helped people run this, but it'll be a kind of a built-in feature of the program at some point. Next question, Alex.
Okay, I think we should just do maybe 3 more questions, because it's getting a little late here. This question is from Mark. He says, how are calculations affected if I retire mid-year? The application seems to base all calculations on the assumption that retirement starts on January 1st of a given year.
Oh, perfect question, Mark. Yeah, we've been kind of bothered by that assumption for a long time, and we're now actively working on what we call end of year planning. So hopefully by this fall, could be later, could be sooner, when you run the program, it's going to be making calculations assuming that the start date is the current month that you're in. So we'll plan from the current month through the end of the year and then beyond. It will not plan going back to January 1st of the current year. And coincident with that, a change in planning, the end of year planning or real-time planning, however you want to call it, coincident with that, we're going to also be providing a mechanism for people to tell us about their retirement accounts and checking accounts, so that we can get in that data on an automatic feed basis, so that you won't have to go check up, hey, what is my current Vanguard account balance in this IRA? It will automatically show up when you run the program. That's what's called in the industry account aggregation. So we're working on that. We're working on end of year planning. That's the key thing we're working on right now. And so I hope that within a couple months, or maybe longer, but not that much longer, we'll definitely have this in there, and that will resolve that question, which is a very good one. I'm glad you asked me. Next question, Alex.
Okay. Yeah. So, a lot of people on here are existing users, maybe, but some of them I think maybe are existing Maximize users. But so one person's asking, what are the costs for Maxify?
What are the costs? Oh, how much the cost?
Yeah.
Well, the basic program is $99. The premium version, this is for a household. The premium version is $139, and that has the Monte Carlo living standard analysis. And I'm going to give you this technical term, which I'll be explaining on July 15th, which is called expected utility analysis, which helps you take these Monte Carlo living standard trajectories associated with getting risky returns. Hey, my living standard's high this year because I did well in the market. Next year it's lower because I did poorly. The next year it's lower even further because again I did poorly. That's a trajectory, and we're going to talk with you about how these things enter into a single number calculating your lifetime happiness. Now, so now I've lost track of the question, Alex. What was that again?
Oh, just the price. That's
the price.
That's all that was.
Yeah, sorry. The price is $139 to include that feature, $99 without it. And then if you're a financial planner, the cost is $499 for the first year subscription, and then it's $379 to renew the program. So we are dramatically lower for financial planners, maybe $2,000 lower than the cost of other conventional planning tools. And we believe we're doing the analysis correctly. We also believe that conventional financial planning can get you into trouble for reasons that I could get into, but I'll just take the next question. Thanks.
Okay, so this should be our final question, but I want to say that if you have a very sort of niche or specific question, feel free to also email me at alex@economicsecurityplanning.com, and I'll see if I can assist. One person asked, and I can't actually find the original question here, but I think it's important. A person asked, talking about rules of thumb of decreasing or increasing your discretionary spending, like after retirement, maybe decreasing it or increasing it. Where in the program can you change your discretionary spending levels if you want? If you want to.
Yeah, another very good question. So it's really the pattern. Our software is finding the level, but the pattern of your living standard, if you want to so you go to settings and assumption, you go to living standard, you click on annual index, and then you see here that the baseline index has values of 100 for every year, and that means that you want your living standard to be perfectly smooth per household member. And there are adjustments when I say per household member, we're taking into account economies and shared living and the fact that kids are cheaper than adults in terms of delivering the same living standard, about 30% cheaper. So, but suppose you wanted to say, hey, starting at 75, I'd like my living standard to decline at maybe so starting this year when I'm 75, 2039, maybe I'd like it to decline by 0.25%. And so I'm going to put in here 0.25%, and then I click grow. And now look at this. The index is declining, and there are decimal places here, you just can't see them, so that your living standard by the end of when you hit 110, if that's your maximal, well, in this case, the maximum age of life is 100. So the living standard goes from 100 down to basically 94, that index. So that's like a 6% reduction. If you wanted to have a bigger reduction, like a minus 1.5% reduction, then you see the living standard is going to start falling more rapidly from 100 to when you're 100 years old, 69. So that's like a 31% decline in your living standard over this period. So you can pattern your living standard any way you want. The program is going to fit its discretionary spending recommendations or suggestions to the pattern that you have set right here on this particular screen, subject to cash flow constraints. If you'd like to spend, 80% more in your 20s than you spend anytime in your 30s and beyond, and you don't have the cash flow to actually do that, the program will not let you do it. It'll let you do it to the extent possible, but at that point, the cash flow constraint will take over. So, so this is a very important feature of the program, because a lot of people realize that they're not going to be taking trips, they're not going to be going out to fancy restaurants, buying expensive clothes. They're going to be economizing later in life, and so their living standard in terms of their outlays will be declining. On the other hand, there may be higher special expenses in the form of out-of-pocket medical expenses, and you would want to enter those under special expenses. And you do that by clicking on household and then restore the special expenses, and then start entering in the special expenses, and then it will show up here under households as a category special expenses once you enter those inputs and save them. So let me stop here. I really appreciate everybody's interest and support of the software. Please spread the word for us. We definitely would appreciate that. Let us help you if you need help. We have a great support team here. Dan Royer is our main support person. He has been working for the company for perhaps 15 years. I also hired him over the phone. I hired almost everybody except my son over the phone, who I knew quite well. And my sister helps us with marketing and these webinars and all kinds of different promotional activities. So we have a great team. We're here to help. You can enter a support ticket in the help center. If you have any questions, Dan can help. Dan does expert reviews. You can buy an expert review with Dan. He's very skilled in doing that. So if you want somebody from our company to look over your plan with you in real time, both looking at the screens at the same point in time, Dan would be the person to do that with you. Just go and purchase an expert review. We also have this Maximize My Social Security tool, which is a standalone tool. We have Mike O'Connor's son, John O'Connor, who's our head of customer support for that tool, who's also terrific and knows Social Security inside and out, because his dad has forced that knowledge down his throat. But anyway, I'm just kidding. But John also does expert reviews of that tool. So if you go to maximizemysocialsecurity.com, if you're a Maximize user and you want to have an expert review of that, you can sign up with John. And that's basically it. Again, thanks very much. And hope you'll join us at the next webinar, which again is on July 15th. It's going to be, it's called Using Maxify to Guide Your Joint Investment and Spending Decisions. So we'll be looking at your portfolio decisions, looking at Monte Carlo simulations of your living standard, looking at expected utility maximization. It's going to show you how to do portfolio analysis the way economics says to do it, because this is the only software program on the planet that does proper economic analysis when it comes to consumption smoothing, but also when it comes to portfolio choice. And then on July 29th, Rick Miller, who has his own financial planning software, financial planning firm, where he gives advice to clients about their finances, and is a longtime user of Social Security, of our software. Rick will be giving a webinar entitled When Can I Retire? So we look forward to seeing you at both of those webinars. All of our webinars will be posted at our website under, if you click on here, webinars, you come to this page, you see the latest webinar that we're going to be giving, but you're also going to see both the webinar, the Q&A that occurred after the webinar was over, and we'll have a long list of these webinars through time for you to take a look at. So you can also send these webinars to friends and send the invitation for the webinars that are forthcoming to your friends and colleagues and relatives. So once again, thanks so much, and I'll just sign off now.
Thank you, everyone.